thinking he's won. You think about going after them, putting a stop to it. You're sick of it happening every day. Instead, you end up sitting at home, replaying it over and over in your mind, wondering why when it happens, you just freeze. You can't think what to say back, or any words you do say come out wrong.
So that's the interesting part for me there. What I'm saying in the piece about the character always recognises them in the moment when he's being targeted, he's being bullied. He's in the moment realising that in effect he's held back by this conditioned response. It's kind of about conditioning. And I think there are really like 4 ways that as human beings we can react when somebody tries to target us with bullying. There's only 4 ways we can react. We can kind of freeze. And I'm sure we've all had that experience. I'm sure you've had that experience. Even if somebody says something, and at the time you're thinking, well, I don't like what they said, but just temporarily your mind goes blank just for long enough that you kind of miss your moment to answer back or come back with something. So you can just freeze. You can just not know what to say, not know what to do. You can be quite shocked, quite overwhelmed by it. Obviously, the second reaction, you can fight back. You can respond in some way. Hopefully, obviously you want to do that appropriately for the situation. But you can speak, you can say something or do something or defend yourself in some way. That's one reaction. The other reaction that we can have is there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. It's a very uncomfortable, very confrontational thing when somebody's bullying. You can want to just take flight. You can want to just flee, just walk away, just leave. Some situations, that's the smartest thing to do. In some situations, that's really not possible. It's really not possible at all. And then the final one is what people call like a fawn response. So you might try to react in a way that tries to win the bully's approval, try to get them to like you, because obviously we all want to be liked, don't we, in life? Obviously that's impossible to be liked by everybody. But when somebody targets us with bullying, it makes us feel so uncomfortable in such a way, we kind of like try to placate them or try to laugh along or try to laugh it off or try to win their approval in some way. So you've got those 4 main responses. So a big part of my work after I do the performance, as at the beginning of the talk, is that I want to share with you and with pupils in your school or people in your organisation, share with you some really important strategies and skills for how exactly do you react. What can you say back? How do you build confidence in yourself and in that kind of reaction? Bullying is all about reactions. It's all about trying to get out of that kind of conditioned response, that response you've conditioned yourself into and try to react in the most appropriate, most assertive, effective way.
Photograph of me at home in my school uniform, my blazer and tie. I look at that photo now. I don't recognise that person. I can't believe I let that happen to me. And I'm not blaming them. I did let it happen. I could have made a different choice. I just didn't know what to do. And the truth is, he never had any power over me. Bullies haven't got any power. Only the power you give them when you don't speak up, when you stay quiet. And what stops you speaking up is that feeling of fear inside that you'll make things worse. If you're going through something like that, it can't get any worse. It can't. You have to be brave. You have to find the courage in yourself to speak out.
So, big message of my work, anti-bullying, is just how important it is to speak up, to tell somebody, to report it, to talk to somebody about it, and not just try to deal with it on your own, not just keep it to yourself. You must talk, but you're always going to that's always going to involve an element of risk. It's always going to involve a kind of what if scenario where you're going to think, well, okay, well, if I say something or I take this action or I do this, okay, I'm prepared to do that, that's fine, but then what's next? What's the consequence of me doing that? And bullies, I think, are quite skilled at manipulating people, situations. In particular, they're quite skilled at being able to manipulate their targets what if scenario or feelings or fears about that and use that against them. And one way that often they'll do this is by just by changing their behaviour. So they might they might they might just stop. I have to think like they might. I experienced this myself. Like you'd as a teenager going into school, you're thinking, if that person says this thing to me today or does anything to me today, I'm going to do this. I'm going to respond in this way. And you go in ready to do that, and then you do encounter this person, and they're completely different to you. They treat you sometimes in a friendly way, or they don't say anything at all. They don't try to bully you like they normally do, and that gives you this feeling of relief. And you think, oh, it's stopped. It's stopped of its own accord, so I don't need to do anything. And then you get this feeling of relief, and then you go in the next day or a couple of days later, and it starts again. Bullying, like any kind of abuse, is very abusive behaviour. It's a cycle. It's a cycle that just repeats. But bullies are skilled at kind of like knowing when to trying to change it, pause that cycle momentarily to give you that feeling that it's stopped, that feeling of relief, and then it kind of like just continues. So you really have to break that cycle, and the best way of doing that is by speaking up. And my advice for people is, if you're going to challenge bullying in the short term, just be prepared for how you're going to feel. You are going to feel very uncomfortable. It's a horrible situation, a horrible thing to be experiencing. You're going to feel uncomfortable in the short term. But I think what I advise people to do is to think long term. So project yourself forward, that 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. I think when I get to that point in the future, I want to look back at this moment and feel really good about this and feel like I stood up for myself. I did the right thing. I protected myself in a way that protects my well-being and all that kind of good stuff. There isn't really an option, I don't think. It's not really an option to not speak up or not speak out, because bullying's a cycle. The longer the cycle goes on, the more it affects you, the more impact it has on your well-being and everything. So you really have to be brave, and you really have to speak out.
Escape. I found it in visualization. I'd go home at the end of the day, sit in my room and imagine situations I've been in. I'd see it in my head like a film. Only this time, the film's got a different ending.
So people say, with phones, with technology today, bullying is effectively 24/7. But in my experience, it always was. Even before phones, before the internet, before technology, it always was 24/7, just because of the way it impacts your mental health and your well-being, the way it occupies your thoughts. So I really identify with what I'm relating to there about finding ways to try and escape from that kind of mental turmoil or torment. So I think it's really important to find a healthy way to escape or to deal with it. So, it's so important that you don't, if you're going through something like that you talk, you tell, you report, you reach out to somebody, you have a conversation with somebody about it. Immediately that you do that, it takes a lot of that weight off your shoulders. It's very hard to deal with just by yourself. So talking and all that kind of stuff is a really, really healthy way to kind of deal with how you're feeling and deal with the situation.